Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you now find you. Welcome to another discussion in our class on the idea of friendship. Last time I asked you to watch a basic video about what thinking is and what reasoning is, and I explained to you that it's involved in what I called the broad common world of knowledge characterized by the logos. The idea that knowledge is not idiosyncratic or something private, but something open and shared and open to inspection by anyone who can reason and think. Now this is important because we want to think about the idea of friendship. And an idea, in its most basic sense, is how a thing really shows itself to us and what it is, so that we can look around and think about things and see what they really are in terms of the reality of the situation, so that we can begin to think about what is most real and how we can live in the light of it, which is at the heart of philosophy, and it's called the love of wisdom. And in thinking about the idea of friendship, we come to a part of our lives that's so very important that it's a central aspect of self-knowledge. And perhaps we can use these texts we're reading, beginning with Aristotle, to begin to think about what we think is most real about living in this world with others, so that we can better live ourselves and know how to live and think and be in a clearer and better way. Consider with me how Aristotle begins his discussion of friendship in the Nicomachean Ethics that I'm having you read, or at least these sections about friendship. Read along with me. After what we have said, a discussion of friendship would naturally follow, since it is a virtue or implies virtue, and is besides most necessary with a view to living. For without friends, no one would choose to live, though he had all other goods. Even rich men and those in possession of office and of dominating power are thought to need friends most of all. For what is the use of such prosperity without the opportunity of beneficence, which is exercised chiefly and in its most laudable form toward friends? Or how can prosperity be guarded and preserved without friends? And in poverty and in other misfortunes, men think friends are the only refuge. It helps the young, too, to keep from error. It aids older people by ministering to their needs and supplementing the activities that are failing from weaknesses. Those in the prime of life, it stimulates to noble action, two going together. For with friends, men are more able both to think and to act. Again, parents seem by nature to feel it for offspring, and offspring for parent, not only among men, but among birds and among most animals. We may even in our travelers note how near and dear every man is to every other. Friendship seems too to hold states together, and lawgivers to care more for it than for justice. For unanimity seems to be something like friendship, and this they aim at most of all, and expel faction as their worst enemy. And when men are friends, they have no need of justice, while when they are just, they need friendship as well. And the truest form of justice is thought to be a friendly quality. But it is not only necessary, but also fine. For we praise those who love their friends, and it is thought to be a fine thing to have many friends. And again we think it is the same people that are good men and friends. Now notice what he says about friendship. First he says it's a virtue, and that it's most necessary for life, and that it involves self-knowledge, and that it is fine. We want to think about each of these things, right? And see if we can understand what he means. Now the first thing to understand is what he means by virtue. That's a translation of the Greek word arete, and it doesn't have quite the meaning that you might think it does when you just see that word virtue. If you think of virtuous, you might think of someone who acts in some very moral way, or we might say, in old-timey people would say women preserve their virtue, by which they meant they wouldn't have premarital sex. Things like that, virtuous, virtue, sounds kind of like a Sunday school kind of thing. But a better translation of it can be got at by considering that Odysseus, for example, who is pictured here on a vase, was considered a virtuous thief, a thief with arete. Now what could that mean? A virtuous thief, like Robin Hood? No. Arete means excellent. And what they meant by that was, he was an excellent thief. He was excellent in performing the function of a crafty fellow who could steal what he needed for his family. In this way of thinking, the world is full of things, and everything has a function, and what is good is explained in reference to it, right? So we have the good, for example, of the flute player, of the sculptor, of the artist, and even of the thief. And the goodness resides in the functioning of that activity. And so the ancient Greeks thought human beings must have a function too. And a human being's goodness would be found in specifying excellence and performance of that function that makes it good, what we might call an operational excellence. So we have things like eyes, and their function are seeing, and their virtue, right, or excellence would be 20/20 vision, and their vice or inexcellence would be blindness. Similarly, a knife has the function of cutting, and it's an excellent knife when it's sharp, and it's an inexcellent knife when it's dull. And you can see how virtue is not a very good word for translating arete, because if you were, say, reading Aristotle and he started talking about a virtuous knife, you would think he'd lost his marbles, or that he was some quaint dude from beyond the dawn of time who just was full of superstition. But if you realize what he meant was, it's a knife that performs its function with excellence, i.e. it's sharp and not dull, you can see what he means. And so a flutist, too, plays the flute well or poorly. But what about a human being? What is the function of a human being? And what would their virtue or excellence be? And what would their vice or inexcellence be? And when something functions well, when it performs its function well, it's said to have eudaimonia. And now here's another bad translation for you, because that is usually, or has been usually, translated as happiness, right? So, again, if you read Aristotle and he talked about a happy tree, you would think, what the heck, right? But what he means by that is a tree that is flourishing in excellence of functioning, right? Eudaimonia means to flourish, that you're fulfilling your function with excellence and flourishing in your environment so that you prosper and do well, right? So everything has a function that it can perform well or poorly, and when it performs it well, it flourishes and exhibits the reality of its nature. So friendship, he says, is an excellence, or related to excellence. It's related to the excellent functioning of a human being. And no human being can be thought to be happy, i.e. to flourish in their environment, without friendship. Now, not only is friendship necessary for a flourishing life, he says, it's more than that. It's something fine, by which he means it goes beyond what is necessary. When you go out of your way to do something that's not necessary, people wonder at it, and they might say, what a fine thing to do, because you weren't expected to do it, right? You just weren't expected to do that thing at all. You went beyond necessity. And there are all kinds of necessities, right? We have to eat and drink, right? And then taking care of children's a necessity. Taking care of your parents is a necessity. Meeting people's physical needs is a necessity. Friends who support each other in difficulties is a necessity. But is there something more than that, he wonders? Is there something which he tags with that word fine? Let's look at the Greek and try to get a clearer meaning of what he's talking about. The word he's using is kalos, and it has three distinct senses that are going to help us think about the idea of friendship. First, kalos can mean beautiful or fair, as when I might say, my lover is so fair, so fine. And by that I mean in appearance, that he or she is just a beauty, right? Or kalos can mean serving a good purpose, fair in that way. So a sailor might say, we dropped anchor in a fair harbor. We dropped anchor in a fine harbor. But it also has this different sense, which moves us beyond these more necessary meanings. It means something like morally beautiful, good, right, or noble. So we might say, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. did such fine things, such fair and fine things, such beautiful, good, right, and noble things that really were beyond what is necessary. And the sort of key question we have to consider here when we're trying to think what we take to be the heart of friendship is, do we agree with Aristotle that friendship can be more than a necessity? Or in general, that we think in life there are things that are more than necessary? Now, the Greek language comes with some built-in distinctions that our language really doesn't have, that we need to understand to make sense of what Aristotle is thinking about. Because there are two main words for love, right? I mean, there's some others, but in terms of what we're thinking about here, there's a basic contrast. There's philia and there's eros. And philia is translated as love, and eros is translated as love, but philia means friendship love, and eros means erotic love. Now, philia, or friendship love, as a related term, of philos, a friend, and philein, the verb to love in a friendly way, and a phileton was something that's lovable in a friendly way, someone you find lovable as a friend. While with eros, you have eran, which means to love or desire erotically, to lust after, you might even say. And an eron was a lover, an erotic lover. And to be erotikos was to be lovable in an erotic way, to be sexually attractive, right? And here, Aristotle is making clear by the language he's using that he's interested in friendship love. And so Aristotle tries to key in on what the nature of friendship is, and to think about the different varieties it comes in by trying to think about what is lovable. As he says here, the kinds of friendship may perhaps be cleared up if we first come to find out what is lovable in a friendly sort of way. For not everything seems to be loved, but only the lovable. And this is what is good, pleasant, or useful, right? So, something could be good or useful for the benefit you receive from it. Something could be good or pleasant for how it makes you feel, or something could be good or fine for what they are in themselves, that goes beyond necessity and doesn't benefit you at all, but you just wonder at because it's so marvelous. And this results in three types of friendship. And here I want to give public thanks to Professor Gregory Sadler, who made these slides available on the web. All I had to do was send him a little note saying I was using them. So I appreciate that, Professor Sadler. So, as Professor Sadler notes, Aristotle distinguishes three main types of friendship, each of which corresponds to a particular type of basic good, either coming from or residing in the friend. Among the different ways in which something can be good for us and can be perceived as good, desired as good, pursued or protected as good, there are several main categories. So there's what is useful, or in Greek, tom sopheron. It's good for something, providing or leading to something else desired. For example, having or getting a job, money or other wealth, business contacts, medicine or exercise. And then there's what is pleasurable, to hedon, which is good to the one who derives or enjoys pleasure from it. For example, enjoying tasty foods, joking around and play, romance and having sex, going out for drinks, playing video games, watching baseball. Whoops, I'm beginning to input my things into the list. And then there's what is noble or fine, to kalan. It's intrinsically good and valuable for its own sake. It's a higher class of good. And as example, excellence of character, genuine intimacy. He's got on his list studying hard subjects. I don't know about that. Maybe if you did it for its own sake, just because it's beautiful, then studying hard subjects would be noble or fine. But in any case, this results, here we go, in three types of friends. Okay. So here, if you're a friend who has virtue, which means arete, remember, or excellence, you recognize virtue in your friend, and your friend recognizes it in you, and you sort of mirror each other and try to help each other become more excellent in terms of what it means to flourish as a human being. And then you could have friends on account of pleasure, right? A friend just takes pleasure in another, and the other gives pleasure to them, right? And that's all there is to it. And then there's friendship on account of usefulness, right? I think of these mostly as workplace friends myself, where I get something useful from them and I get something useful. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. We work together well at work because we can make our work flow easily. We get things done, but that's it, right? We never see each other outside of work, and we'll never call each other up. It's just at work we help each other out, right? 3 different kinds of friends. And for these 3 kinds of friends to exist, Aristotle says, there are certain conditions that must be met. First, you must reciprocate it. In other words, we're not going to be friends, say, of utility. That means of usefulness. If I help you and you don't help me, then we're not friends. If I give pleasure to you, but you don't give pleasure to me, we're not friends. And if I help you become more excellent, but you don't help me become more excellent, then we're not friends either, right? So you have to have reciprocated goodwill. And then you have to have, he says, awareness of the relationship. In other words, you can't be friends with someone who's not friends with you, right? No matter how much, for example, I may admire the Dalai Lama, right, and have all kinds of feelings of goodwill toward him, he doesn't even know I exist, so we can't be friends. And finally, this friendship has to exist either because it's good or fine, pleasant, or useful. So this ought to be enough to get our discussion going in next class. I'm going to bring up some more points, show you some more slides during our Zoom lecture, and talk some more about it. But I wanted to give you this basic set of information to think about to help you as you read the Nicomachean Ethics, as you read what I'm giving you to read, and as we're preparing for class. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for your kind attention.